Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming today. Here we have Dr. Adeola Mead. She's going to share with us some of the gems of wisdom that she's accrued over the years of being a naturopathic doctor. She works in corporate wellness and she has about 15 years experience. Is that right, Adeola?
Yep.
And her and I have been having conversations. We met on LinkedIn. She's doing cool stuff in the corporate world with wellness, and she's seen a lot of different scenarios in her naturopathic physician career. So this interview will be getting a sense from her experience, what worked well, what didn't work well in various practices that she's been part of, what worked well and what didn't work well in her own practice. And hopefully we can all accelerate our own process and better actualize our potential as clinicians, and specifically for naturopathic physician clinicians. But this isn't exclusively for NDs. This is for any functional health doctor. The business model is very similar. Maybe certain things are going to be unique to the ND modality, but a lot of things are going to be common. So thank you, Adeola. I would love to maybe start by just asking you, what's alive for you today? What do you bring to us? What do you think would be most valuable for our folks to hear just kind of right off the bat in terms of really crafting a practice that supports our deeper human needs?
Sure. That's a great question. First of all, thanks for having me. And that's a really good place to start.
Thanks for being here. Yeah.
I've been thinking about this a lot lately, is just mindfulness and mindfulness practices and becoming present in the present moment. And I think that's something that we as NDs often will teach our patients to practice mindfulness, to get clear. But I think as clinicians, especially as entrepreneurs, that's an important practice for our business, is to get really clear on what those basic human needs are that need to be met. Because I think a lot of times we get out of school, we start practicing, we just start going, like the nebulous goal is just to be successful, to pay bills, to, see patients and continue to progress as a clinician. But I think sometimes it's really helpful to take the time to step back and get really clear on where it is we would really like to go with this practice. How would we like to feel as a clinician? What do we want to bring into our clinical relationships, therapeutic relationships? How do we want to influence our patients? What's our short and long-term goal for this career? But it's not just your work, it's just like who you're being in the world, who you're being as a professional, and how you're influencing these souls that you're able to care for. So I think that's what I would say right off the bat, is just taking time to get really clear on those needs that need to be met. And they're general ones, but they're specific ones for each person, right? So what are those for you?
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. And it really gets into this critical phase, and maybe it's not even a phase. I think it's an ongoing work of really knowing ourselves and knowing those needs, which is actually isn't that easy, especially when, you've come out of a really intensive, demanding training for 4 years or more, right? And I think it's easy to maybe lose touch with some of those needs when you have to just perform, right? So this critical phase of starting a practice, doing that, I would call it like vision work of like, what could this look like? What would I want this to look like? Do you find that folks are doing that before starting their practice? And if not, what is missing, and what are the consequences of maybe bypassing that critical sort of setting of the energetic foundation, is what I call it.
Yeah.
And for those that do it well, what are they doing to really honor that visioning process that is the energetic foundation for a successful practice?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. So I don't know that people are doing that very much coming out of school. Like coming out of school is intense, depending on, what your program looked like and what's going on in your life while you're going through the program. Just getting through, it's really fair to take a deep breath, a sigh, a break, to reset. But I don't know that during that time that everyone gets that opportunity. I think a lot of times it's just like, I'm done and now bills need to get paid, things need to get done, I want to move forward, I have a job waiting, I don't have a job waiting, those kind of things. So we don't always take the time to craft what we'd like for it to look like. And it's a hard thing to do while you're in school too, because your big focus is completing the program and getting out and moving forward. But I do think it's very important. And I have had preceptors that, preceptees that I've worked on worked with on that, is just, what do you love? Who do you want to see? Why did you become a practitioner in the first place? Why did you come here? All the whys. What brought you here? Why do you do this every day? Why are you sticking with it? Lots of people leave the program because they realize it's not for them or whatnot. You're sticking with it. Why? So connecting with those whys, I think, is really important. And then getting really creative. Like, I think a lot of times we see practice looking a certain way for so many people that we work with, especially in school, that we just assume this is what you do. You kind of jump on the conveyor belt and here we go. You have a primary care practice, or you have a specialty practice, or whatever it is that you see, you just kind of start doing too. But I think it's really important to dream. I had this one preceptee who described herself as a go-getter. I'm a go-getter. I like to do things. She wanted to work with like cancer patients. She had a family history of I think her mom or a family member who had cancer and got through it with the help of naturopathic medicines. That made a huge impression on her. So I asked, what do you want to do when you're done? And she was like, well, I don't know, I don't know. And I was like, what do you like to do? And, who do you want to see? Well, cancer patients. And like, there's just so many things you could do. You could work in a hospital. You could provide content for other clinicians who provide, cancer care. You could have your own adjunctive cancer care clinic. You could decide you want to work on products that help with cancer. There's just so many different things you could do. And we had a whole whiteboard full of different things she could do that kind of matched her skill sets and her passions that weren't like standard clinical practice, right? So, and I remember she just kind of stood back and looked kind of wide-eyed at this board, like, oh my goodness, there are so many things to get. So just finish school, take a screenshot, take a picture of this board, and then just start to play with some of these ideas. So that was, a short brainstorming session. But I think even doing it on your own, doing it with someone, one of the questions asked me before, like, what should you do right out of school? And I would say, find a mentor, find someone who has been doing it for a while, potentially is doing what you think you'd like to do, because that might change, what you think they're doing, what you would like to do, and just start to glean wisdom, ideas from them, and someone who you can just start to brainstorm with and workshop with or observe, or just, you need some path in front of you, unless you want to be an absolute trailblazer right out of the gate. But just, if you have that support, I think it makes a big difference. And there are too many mistakes to make on your own. So you might as well avoid some of the mistakes someone else has made, and, learn from their wisdom and stand on their shoulders. And it can be several people for sure, but start with an idea of what you like to do, and attach yourself to someone who is doing that kind of thing already. And then feel it out. Just let it unfold before you, but at least start there.
That's awesome. And, this experience that you had with the preceptee, I think that right there is so rich. And there's so many things in that I think are worth maybe even teasing out. One of them is, I'm really curious about sort of the transformation she may have even gone through. You mentioned this moment where she looked at this whiteboard full of like these vibrant ideas. And what did that do for her? How was that, before the session? What was her emotional milieu like before the session? And what was it like after seeing that? If you could describe that in more detail.
Yeah, sure. So what I really liked about this preceptee was she had this really open spirit. right? So that's one of the reasons why I wanted her to preceptor with me, because I just felt like she was ready to learn. She was a go-getter, right? So she was ready to work hard, which is important. And she came, she observed, we saw some patients together, and she was just a little bit, you could sense that she was still a little bit like torn, like a little bit confused. And yes, that was a good session. This seems like doable, because when you're in school, it's just like, how do you do this, on a regular basis by yourself? So she's like, okay, this seems doable and that makes sense. And this was a streamlined process. And okay, because when you're in school, there's just so many things that you don't do in regular practice. So she's like, oh, okay, this is doable. But I could tell she was just like, what am I going to do? How is this going to look? So you could tell there are lots of like question marks in her space. And so I just asked, like, if you weren't feeling this kind of confusion or this foggy feeling, then what would it look like? And then she started to dream a little bit, right? So it went from, I don't know, lots of question marks to exclamation points, if you can think about it in punctuations too. Yes, there are possibilities. And she was an inherently creative person, right? So when I think a lot of times, and this happens with patients too, it's a matter of giving people permission to let go of the restrictions they put on themselves, to let go of the preconceived notions and ideas that they have about how things should be, because it really doesn't have to be that way for any given situation, right? Like you can detach yourself from the decision you made this morning and decide you want to do something else or be another way. So we're always recreating ourselves. So like with patients, for example, and some of the other practitioners might notice this, but I remember I had one just the other day who was just like, I need to work on my sleep, give me some more magnesium or something like that. I'm like, well, what's going on? She's like, oh, it's my adult siblings, they're terrorizing me and I can't sleep. And I'm like, how about some boundaries? Like let's talk about implementing some serious boundaries to help make you feel safe. And then how do you go from there? And I remember it was the same look that this preceptee had, was just that kind of shoulders coming down and kind of sitting back a little bit, like, I can do that. I'm like, yeah, you can do that. You can absolutely do that. You can do whatever you want. You're an adult and you can make decisions and you can redecide and change your mind. But it was that same kind of shift in energy from, I don't know, and it's causing me problems, to, oh, I can do that. So just kind of giving people permission to dream, to try, to make attempts and to learn.
Yeah. And that just, looking at that from the outside, that just seems incredibly empowering. And knowing that from the inside, I know it's incredibly empowering. And there's a couple of things here. You mentioned before, really getting close to that why of what we're doing and really holding that at the forefront. And I think I see this, and I think you see this too. You mentioned just the grind of getting out of med school, the grind of getting out there and needing to pay the bills. And I think what we're both seeing is that a lot of folks start with the how,
yes,
rather than the why. The how, like, okay, how do I pay the bills? How do I get this thing rolling? How do I start a practice? How do I, do what they did, right? Whereas, there's this power of really starting the why with the why. And we've been talking about creativity in this, right? And even this visioning exercise that you did with the preceptivity, it's an inherently creative process, right? So what happens? What is happening here when we embrace creativity in relationship with the why? And how do we make that practical in terms of creating a successful practice, that's able to support ourselves? Like, what would that look like? What could that look like? And perhaps what did that look like for your preceptee if you got that far?
Yeah. So I think once you start with a why, then your energy kind of shifts, right? So I think when we start with a how, then we are focusing on ourselves. We're just like, what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? How am I going to get this opportunity? How am I going to create that opportunity? We're kind of focusing on ourselves and what we can do. And it's a lot. Once you're out of med school, you have a lot of capability. But I think once you start to focus on why, it'll help you hone in on this very authentic and genuine place where I think creativity starts to spring out of you without trying as much. So for her, it was working with cancer patients because she saw how incredibly powerful that was. So then she started to think of all the many ways she could support cancer patients with her individual skills and her gifts. And I think then you start to relate to who it is you want to serve, and you start to think about what they need, right? So you might want to ask questions of that demographic or do some research, because now you're tapping into your why and what is it that they need or this scenario needs. What is the problem that you're solving? And then I think so many more questions and answers will come from there when you focus on the reason you're doing what you're doing. And I think for building a successful practice, for me, it's always been, who is it I'm serving and what are their needs? And that's kind of what got me into corporate wellness as well. It's just over time, it's been different people. At first, it was like cardiovascular health, because that was the clinic I was working in and that was the need that they had there. So I started there, and it meant a lot to me because I had a family history of losing my dad after a sudden stroke from cardiovascular disease. So I thought, this is absolutely what I want to do. And I loved it and continued with that, and then started to see more women in women's health. I thought this is important. I'm a woman. This makes sense. These people need, these incredible women need support in ways that I can provide, and so on and so forth. And then it kind of morphed into mental health and metabolic health. And with the convergence of women's health, mental health, and metabolic health, I was like, well, there's so many ways I can serve these people, but they would always come to me. Like, this is just what I'm seeing as patterns in my work and the people who are coming to me. So it's like, how can I serve them best? And then it turned into, these people are really, really stressed, very, very stressed in very specific ways that are related to their workplace, their caregiving work, or their work in the corporate sector. So how can I help them? How can I help more people like this? And that kind of led me into corporate wellness. But it's always been this process of following what life or practice was bringing to me and kind of staying open to that. So I think that can be part of the process, is starting from why, and then who as well. Why am I doing this, and who is it that I really want to serve? And then figuring out their needs. And that's a marketing too, right? Like often in marketing, it's like, who's your ideal client, and who's like an avatar of who it is you're serving, and where do they hang out, which spaces can you find them in? And marketing really, to me, is sharing, right? Like sharing who I am, sharing what I do, sharing how I can help you. So it's like having a conversation with anyone, someone at a bus stop, really. It's just like, hey, what do you do? Well, I do this. This is how I help people. And it looks like I can help you with that. That kind of thing is just like an open sharing process. So I think that's a great place to start, is to start with the why, start with the who, and let creativity spring from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love hearing just how organic it's been for you, and you're crafting your practice and working from your why, working from your passion. Really, what I'm hearing here is it's a problem-solving mentality. This is really an entrepreneurial mindset of, we're not just focusing. I mean, there is an element of what I want, who I want to serve, how I want to serve them, but really getting a feel for what folks are needing, really having our attention on that other person, which is so vital for an entrepreneur, really out there solving a problem in a way that they can hear us, with our marketing message, and in a way that they feel satisfied. So I'm curious, entrepreneurial mindset, marketing mindset, these aren't things that are taught in naturopathic schools, right? And they're often, as a naturopathic doctor, as an alumni, you might not necessarily find that unless you seek business training. But, how can that accelerate somebody's path forward in their practice to work on entrepreneurial mindset, work on marketing mindset, work on collecting other business skills that are going to help craft a practice that's deeply satisfying?
Yeah, I think they're indispensable. You absolutely have to have some sort of business training, some sort of business mentorship, a community of business leaders, people who are already doing it. And that's why I say it's important to start with a mentor, someone who already has the kind of practice that you like to have, so that you can see those inner workings of how it works, right? And I think we don't get that in school. You're so focused on the clinical parts that you, even if they tell you, I remember we had like practice management and things like that, you're just like, okay, manage your practice, great. Pass the class and move on. When you get started, there's just so many layers of starting a practice and maintaining a practice that it helps to have someone to walk alongside. But I think those skills are indispensable, because it helps shift you from wearing the clinician hat to wearing an entrepreneur hat,
which are totally different skills, right?
Completely different skills. They're completely different skills, and it takes time to cultivate them. But I think it's absolutely doable, but it's taken time and a process. And I benefited from joining like business networking groups, actually, and networking with other NDs who were already doing what I wanted to do, and being blessed by them peeling back the curtain a little bit and showing me how that worked. But then other functional medicine or other entrepreneurs, other service-based providers, a lot of that is transferable, right? So if you know someone who is a dentist who provides, various other services, nutritionists, massage therapists, that kind of thing, just figuring out how their system works, and see if it will work for you. But yeah, business skills, absolutely indispensable. Reading, but I think having a community, a live community of people who can support you in those goals, makes all the difference.
Right on. And this is kind of the fun question. We were kind of talking a little bit about this in the beginning. And I know it's like, if you're in the flow, then you don't think like this. You mentioned this, like, yeah, we don't regret anything. Everything happened the way it was supposed to be. It was organic. One thing led to another, right? And so our struggles end up being our superpowers, because those are what allow us to grow. But in the hypothetical scenario that you're just coming out of school now, knowing what you know, having all that experience, how would you build out your career and practice? What would you be doing to maybe sort of accelerate the blossoming of your career and your business? What would you do?
Yeah, I would have started to craft earlier some programs. Programs are transformative, is what I've realized over time. It can get
Could you define a program for us?
Yes, a program would be a system, a structure that you place, that you share with a patient. It's like a journey where it's like, so let's say your heart is for cancer patients, right? And you want to do adjunctive care. And when they come and see you, this is the status they generally are in. So sometimes it requires seeing a few patients and getting an idea of what it is you want to do and what they need. But then when you figure that out, okay, here's where they start. Here's where I would like to take them. Here are the things that I know work in general. And of course, you're focusing on individualized care, but what kind of testing are you going to need? What kind of patient education are you going to need? What kind of support are you going to need outside of yourself? What types of experiences might you want to curate for them? Do you want to curate a community aspect for them so that they don't feel alone or don't feel entirely reliant on you? What kind of support do you want for their families? So you want to think about ways to comprehensively support them in the process, to get them from where they are when they come in to see you to where it is they would like to be, and where you can help support them in achieving those goals. So yeah, just all those nuts and bolts, like first A, then B, like what's the path, what's the process? And this is where you go from a whiteboard full of ideas to a very linear process. How does it work? When do things get done? What triggers what next step? And then which tools, which technology, which staff support do you need to make all those things happen seamlessly, so that you have a client or patient experience that feels very supported, organic, and smooth. So that's kind of what a program is. It's just like Do they start with initial visit? After that, how long is that visit? After that, what comes after that? What kind of supplements might they need? What kind of other care? Do they need IV? All these things. So I would have started that process earlier, I think, because I have found that programs are transformative. People really do feel safe when you tell them, here's where you are. I am going to help you by putting you into this program, into this journey. This is where you're going to end up, and we're going to go together. And here's all the help you're going to get. Here's all the education you're going to get, because so much of our work is education. So that has to be part of it. And we are going to be partners in helping you to achieve this goal. And I've just seen those be completely transformative, and people feel safe in your care that way, and they feel committed. So people who are committed to a program are going to show up. They're not going to no-show you, which can be really frustrating as a practitioner when you like prepare and you have everything ready and you saw them once, saw them twice, and then you don't see them again, and you know that you can help them, but you didn't have that commitment with them. You hadn't, kind of built that into your relationship together. So that's something that a program does too, is it helps build that commitment to building a therapeutic relationship together, and then, reaching goals together.
That's awesome. Yeah. And this subject of programs is really so rich. And gosh, I mean, you got a couple things. A program allows you to get commitment, just to kind of sum this up. A program probably allows you to, and they're able to see clearly a transformation, right? They're not just buying into, say, an FOC, like an initial consultation or a series of consultations. They're buying into, would you call it a transformation or potentially I know we can't guarantee results, but right. We can say like, hey, we're committed to getting results for you.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And I think that gives hope, and hope is what keeps patients, anybody, motivated to continue, right? You only keep doing things because you hope something will happen after you do it. So I think that gives hope when you're like, this is the process we're going to go into, and this is where we hope to end up, and like you said, you can't guarantee results, but you can guarantee that if both of you are committed, that you will make a significant amount of progress. And then you can always say that if things aren't progressing the way you expect, then you will work hard as a practitioner to troubleshoot. You'll figure it out together. And I think, no one can guarantee an end result, but just knowing that you have that level of support and partnership, it just gives, it's so heartening, right? It's like, okay, no matter what this process is, I have someone who's going to walk and work alongside with me to make progress, to go where it is I want to go. And I think that can also help you develop that sense of relationship, but also commitment, right? So you are saying, I'm committed to this process with you. Are you committed to also doing the work with me? And I think that's a great way to start a relationship.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And gosh, so I mean, this container has so many wonderful elements to it. And, once you put people through this program, you all of a sudden can collect these testimonials of like, I can't guarantee results, but hey, look at this, and this person who've gotten this, and this result, right? So it's like the process, you have all this social proof that you're able to build up through that as well.
Yes.
So yeah, that's fantastic. I would love to, man, we should do a web interview just on packages. Right? Packaging, processing, because this is deep work. This is not easy work to actually like make this sort of, all these components laid out on like a whiteboard as like sticky notes, all these things that you do consistently through from client to client, patient to patient, make that into like a linear defined stepwise process, right? So that for you, maybe this will be the last question. I'd love to open it up to Q&A for anybody who would like to ask questions. What was that process like for you, coalescing your craft into a program?
Yeah, time.
Okay. Experience, like time and experience, is that what you mean?
Yes, time by way of experience for sure. It's kind of a funny story, but like I said, over time, started cardiovascular health, women's health, mental health, metabolic health, and realized that I come alive when I can contribute to someone else's happiness. So just not just like their physical wellness, that's great. But when someone can go from anxious or depressed to feeling calm and resilient, like that is my jam. This is exactly where I want to be. I want to be a part of that. So just, mental wellness is connected to physical health and all those. So how can I put all those things together? So I decided to make this program, and I was just doing this with patients for years and years and years and years. So lots of experience to lend to confidence and being able to get results for people, because I had for so many years. And I thought, well, I'm just going to start with just sharing information. A lot of the information that you share over and over and over and over again, I thought I'm just going to share it. So I made a series. It was a webinar series, and it was going to be 12 weeks. I did it for an entire summer, and I'm just going to invite people to it. And Bill, nobody came. My mom came. My mother-in-law came a couple of times.
I've had flops like that too. I think we all have, right? It's like, that's the first stab. It's like the first arrow isn't even going to land, right? So tell me more.
My mother-in-law came a few times, and it was adorable because she's like, Addie, how do I put this on? And did I press the right button? And I'm recording it. So, and then a few other times, a couple of people came here and there, but it was like 12 weeks. And most of those weeks, it was just me recording into my computer.
Okay.
I let that sit for a while and say, well, I have it all recorded now. So I went ahead and transcribed it. So I had it in text. And then I just made these handouts, pieces of content. And then I made that my program. And then when I was sharing it with people, it was organized now. And then I was able to explain to them the process. And then they were committing to the program. So it was like a free 12 weeks. It was a free 12-week webinar series. I wasn't charging anything for that, but it grew into a program that was, financially beneficial for me, but so beneficial for people who were ready to commit. So they were not the people who committed to the free webinar, but they were the people who needed that transformation. So that was my process of developing this program, but it took time and just perseverance, like keeping at it made it helpful.
Yeah, and I'd love to, there's something I'd like to highlight here, that it could be easy for a new entrepreneur to have that experience and label it as a failure, right? But that was actually the stepping stone for your success, and you made that into a success, right? So this is just a key principle that, business is an iterative process. This is part of the entrepreneurial mindset. We need to experiment. We need to fire arrows and see where they land, see what's hitting, seeing what's missing, right? And a key principle here is actually, fails are actually really good. And the key is to fail fast, because the faster you fail, the faster you can refine it and find out what's actually going to stick, what's actually knocking it out of the park, right? Because you don't want to spend 3 months or 9 months or for 24 months developing a program that no one's going to buy, right?
Right.
So if you can shorten that learning cycle from 3 months to, say, 4 weeks, or to 2 weeks, right? So, gosh, I think there's a lot more to unpack there, and maybe we can, but I'd like to open it up for Q&A.